Hello everyone, and welcome to Webflail, the show where we talk to successful webflowers about their 3 biggest failures of their creative career so far, and what they have learned from them, and how these failures have changed their processes, practice, and in some cases, even their personality. I am your host, Jack Redley, and for today's episode, I am joined by the mighty Jenna Manthe, founder of the studio Holy Moly Creative. And she designs and develops Webflow websites that make you say, holy moly. I absolutely love that line. Jenna, welcome to Webflow.
Thank you. Yay.
It is epic to have you here. There's been a lot of worry about internet because we may go off, may go on, but we're fine for now. We are live streaming, and it's all going to be okay, I'm sure. But if anyone that's watching sees Jenna get up and switch off lights, she's just adjusting her podcasting settings and stuff. So
May get dark around here, but I've got some backup.
that's absolutely fine. And hello to people that are watching. We've got 3 people watching currently, so hello.
Probably my partner and my parents.
That is absolutely fine. Family support more than welcome. So if anyone wants to ask any questions throughout this, please do. I love having engagement with people. That is why we're trying to do these live streams, to get engagement from the community. So please ask any questions that you need. And at the end, we will dig into those. If I don't get to the questions, then I may be actually writing blog posts about them and stuff like that. And all of it really, really helps. So please feel free to ask those. Cool.
My power just went out, hence the slight darkness now.
That is absolutely fine. I anticipate that this episode might have some technical failures, but that is absolutely fine. We will ride them out. This podcast is all about overcoming difficulties and learning from failures. So we are just going to do it, and it's going to be completely natural and in line with the branding of this show.
Really authentic.
Exactly. So, Jenna, let's get into a little bit about you, just so that anyone watching, even if they are your parents, my parents still don't really know what I do, so maybe this is helpful for you to explain to them if they are watching. You were a front-end developer, then you went into marketing, and then you've kind of come back round to websites by founding your studio. So tell us a little bit about you and your kind of journey into Webflow.
Cool. Yeah. So I always kind of chuckle at myself that my first job was a front-end developer. I think it's hard to say that was it because it was 3 months. It was a great starting point for me out of university. But it wasn't the right kind of company fit for me, and decided to leave there after 3 months and ended up cracking a really good job as a graphic designer at one of Africa's top travel agencies called Travel Start. So I was there for 2 years and worked as a graphic designer for a year. And then I evolved into a marketing coordinator role where I was kind of managing the brand team and speaking to all different departments in the company, mostly working on like bigger campaigns. And after 2 years there, then I decided I needed another adventure, and I left and went to another travel company and took on a marketing manager role. It was a startup, so we were a really small team of 5. And when I say I was a marketing manager, I was everything under marketing. So I was doing design, I was doing development, I was doing copywriting, SEO, a little bit of everything, which can be overwhelming for a lot of people, but naturally it was also great to get a taste of everything. And I think I'm quite lucky that I can adapt to doing a lot of that kind of stuff. But again, after about, I think it was a year or so, I just felt a little bit saturated and like wasn't really feeling it. And one of the core things that was really important at this company was wine. so a lot of the experiences that they arranged was all centered around wine. And I just thought to myself, how can I go on a sabbatical and they'll take me back once I'm done with whatever I want to go do, but I really want to break. And I ended up going to Napa Valley and working at a wine estate for 6 months, making wine and just living the dream. And yeah, really cool experience. Thought I wanted to be a winemaker after that, but life had other journeys for me. And came back to South Africa, went back to my job, and 2 months later, COVID hit. And obviously, working in the travel industry, that didn't turn out very well. And it was about October. I was working 2 days a week, and I kind of just thought, this is not happening for me. Like, I don't really want to ride this wave. As much as I love the travel industry, it was feeling like a lot. And I can't exactly remember where I heard about Webflow, but I think it was some friends of mine that also have a little agency. And I think they just mentioned to me that they're building on Webflow. And at the time, I was helping a client with a site on WordPress and just really hating myself for it, not enjoying it. I've never been a fan of WordPress and decided to look into Webflow in December of 2020. And then that's when it just all started happening. I just decided to do the shift, to leave WordPress behind. I was going to become a Webflow girl and did my own website on it. And the rest is pretty much history now.
Wow. Okay. That's a really amazing overview. And and what was it about WordPress that was just like, I'm not a fan. I wanna switch?
I guess like I have basic knowledge of HTML and CSS, and it can get me so far. But I was using Elementor, and it felt restricted to me. Maybe I didn't know it well enough, but the amount that I did know, I just didn't feel like it was allowing me to do the kind of designs that I wanted to do. And then a big thing for me was when I was handing it off to the client that I was working with at the time, it felt really difficult to try and explain to her how to update things, how to navigate to different areas of the site. I mean, I struggled myself with that. So I was just putting myself in her shoes, someone that knows nothing about coding, nothing about design, and now trying to figure her way through this website. It actually made me feel quite bad, because one of my number one priorities when working with the clients is that I want to empower them. I want to empower them to be able to have certain control over their website when I hand it over, and not have to feel like they always need to message me for an answer or to update a basic piece of text or change an image or whatever. And that's how I was feeling when I was on WordPress. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people who are now on Webflow have basically come from WordPress, it seems. For a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. And I think the handover process of Webflow is just so much simpler than WordPress, in my opinion. So really resonating with everything that you're saying. One thing that I think Webflow is kind of an interesting place to be right now is that a lot of people who have been using WordPress, maybe have been custom coding a lot of things, they are able to make the most insane websites on Webflow. And as someone that's starting out in Webflow, it can be a little bit intimidating. So now I'm going to segue seamlessly into your first failure, which is comparison. Can you talk to me a little bit about comparing yourself to other people and how you have kind of got over that?
Yeah, I think this was something I really struggled with in the beginning. And of course, it's still something I don't know if I would use the word struggle now, but it's something I still encounter on a somewhat regular basis. But obviously, coming into things with my background and never having seen Webflow before and being like a complete newbie, it was so easy to fall into that trap of, going onto social media, particularly Twitter, when I eventually found it and saw that there was such a strong Webflow community on there. Yeah, it was just a trap I fell into quite often, seeing people posting the websites that they've created or how much they're making on a month by month. And I'm like kind of looking at what I'm charging or looking at the websites I'm producing and thinking, jeepers, I've got like such a long way to go. But then with that, completely forgetting how much time I've spent in it versus how much time these designers and developers have spent in Webflow. And just, yeah, and to this day, like I still forget that. And I find it difficult to kind of pull myself out of that and realize, someone's maybe been doing this for 5 years and I've only been doing it for shy of 2 years now. But I still kind of, I suppose it's maybe a confidence thing and also not really realizing I still have room for growth. But it's just it's quite easy to play that comparison game and think, why am I not good enough yet? But forgetting, you've got time, you've got to put in that work.
Yeah, and I definitely think you mentioned at the start of explaining that about money and people posting money, and I think sometimes we attribute financial success to like life success. The more money you make, because it's such an easy metric to measure success by, or how good you are at something by. We all know that 100,000 is more than 10,000 or whatever. It's a really difficult thing to get over because you're looking at your own, how much you're charging, and you're like, oh, well, they must be providing so much more value than me. I would push back on that though and say that I think if you're working with, Yahoo or whatever, naturally you're going to be needing to charge that much just to even be in the ring to get that job. And there's a lot of like pricing psychology and stuff. Do you feel like Twitter has maybe, even though, comparison is quite hard and sometimes you see stuff on Twitter and it just makes you feel like a piece of shit. That's what I find. It also helps you to have confidence because sometimes I look at these websites where, I know that people are charging because they talk about it the whole time. I know that people are charging quite a lot. And I'm like, oh, wow. They just have maybe more confidence than me, or, they're in the ring that I want to move towards maybe. Do you feel like, as much as Twitter can be quite difficult to compare yourself to, it is also quite a positive thing in some respects? Do you find that?
100%. I mean, especially with the pricing thing, coming from South Africa, the exchange rate is huge compared to the dollar. I mean, it's 17 Rand to $1. So going into it, I had no idea, what people were charging. I really was clueless, and I obviously tried the whole Google thing, like what to charge for a Webflow website. Not really coming up with the answers that I wanted. But definitely Twitter has 100% more confidence to me. And seeing those tweets, of course, you have days when you're just having a tough day and a bit of a downer, and you see someone's tweet like, I just made 50,000 Rand or $50,000 in 1 month. Like, to me, I suppose in dollars, that's a lot still. But in South African Rands, that's huge. Like, that's a large amount of money. And the thought of me being able to charge something like that or charge a couple of projects to clock up to that just seemed completely bizarre. But it definitely made me realize, hey, I actually have zero clue what people are willing to charge. And maybe I'm completely underselling myself. I need to step up and just throw it out there and be a little bit more ballsy with what I charge clients. And I've done that, and it's been super successful. So it definitely, there are those two sides of one. Sometimes you can compare and it can bring you down, but sometimes those tweets that you do see are a bit of a kick in the butt to like make you step up and reevaluate things a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And if anyone's watching who resonates with this, I've found it really helpful to follow people that post things where they're coming from the right place. Like some people, it's just an ego trip. Like, I earn 50,000 a month. And then you're just like, cool, great, cheers, mate, or whatever. Whereas some people are saying, I started here, I'm now here, here's how I did it with some actionable steps that you can do. Now that is kind of the same general post, you know, I earn £50,000 a month or whatever it is. But they're coming from a place where they're trying to help others. So I think, you know, that just depends on what side of Twitter you're on. And unfollow people that make you feel like shit consistently is what I would also recommend, because it has changed my mental health tremendously.
Definitely a couple of those unfollows. But one thing that that I've done that I think has definitely helped me in this kind of fail was at the beginning of this year, I actually wrote down a few goals for myself. And at the time, they felt really big and audacious. And I was like, damn, okay, these are the things I want to tick off by the end of the year. And slowly but surely, I've obviously been going through those and always keeping them in the back of my mind. And days when I have been comparing or just like feeling a bit down or not feeling like terribly motivated, I've actually gone back to those goals and either seen like, jeepers, I'm 10% away from hitting all of these goals and it's not even halfway through the year, or damn, I've actually hit one of these goals like 4 times over, and realizing and taking stock of like just how far I've come. And then it completely puts things into perspective. Then I'm like, okay, I was comparing myself to XYZ, but now I can compare myself to myself and look at what I was achieving at the beginning of the year versus what I've achieved up until this point. And wow, look how far I've come. And it's definitely been something that I think a lot of people forget. You forget to like sit down and really like take stock of what you've done and what you've achieved. And if you are able to go back to something that you were hoping you were going to achieve and be able to look at it and go, I've done it, my gosh, it just does like the biggest boost for yourself, which is, yeah, it's definitely something that's helped me.
Yeah, I love that. This is, are you talking about your 8 goals that you wrote at the start of the year? Because I saw that on Twitter. I think you posted. Yeah. And this kind of links to a comment that we've just got from Emily. She talks about comparing herself to someone else who makes more money than her. Even if she reaches that success level, that feeling will never go away until I address where that feeling is coming from. I think this links to what you're saying, because you have your own idea of success. And I think that's the fundamental problem with comparing yourself to someone else. Like, someone else has their own idea of what is success. They have had their own journey. Whereas you writing down your goals, that is, you know, isolated to what your level of success is and what your goals are. And I think comparing yourself to the 6 months ago Jenna is far, far healthier than comparing yourself to anyone else out there on Twitter, frankly, because everyone has their own journey to run.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool though that you've written down your goals and you have, you know, you've imagined the life you want to have, and now you're kind of fulfilling that. Do you have any advice to someone that's maybe watching that is a little bit lost in their Webflow journey, maybe is comparing themselves to other people, and kind of struggling to know, you know, what they should be doing next? Do you recommend just writing down simple goals for yourself and looking back in 6 months at those goals like you have done?
Yeah. For me, those goals were really actionable steps. I mean, there were some basic ones were like create 5 clonables by the end of the year that I could share with the community, or create and publish 3 templates on the Webflow marketplace. There were some like things that were really tangible and I knew were achievable. Now, obviously looking back, I think, wow, I could have bumped those values up a bit more. But it's obviously acknowledging where you are in your journey and being able to envision like how far you can come in a year, and definitely writing those down and making sure that they're things that are achievable, but then also putting down some really crazy ones. I obviously put down some more like financial related ones, And at the time that I put them down, I thought they were really wild. But now that I look at them, I think, what was I thinking? I was being so safe. So definitely doing some more like cautious ones and then going a bit wild with some other ones. And then that kind of leaves you in a position like at the end of the year, did you really exceed things? Or of course, there's always room to grow. But how close were you to getting those crazy ones?
That's a really, really interesting point. Like making sure that you have goals that stretch you, but also have goals that you can do, and have like a range of goals depending on what you think is achievable. So did you say, okay, in 6 months I'm going to review these, and or how have you kind of gone about it? Have you stuck it up, I don't know, on your wall, like above your computer, or
It's sitting in my Notion. I'm a die-hard Notion fan. So I've just got a little Notion page that I wrote them down with a little check box that you can tick off once they're done. I forget about them for a while, and then of course when I hit what I know is a milestone, then I'll always go back and either tick it off or like make a note and be like, you hit this 3 times over or whatever. But it's not like something I'm actively looking at. But maybe I think more so on the days that I'm struggling, when I just don't feel very motivated or feel like I'm a bit overwhelmed or like stressing out that I haven't had an inquiry for a while or whatever, then I take myself back to it, and it can at least put things into perspective that, hey, you're really not doing too bad.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice, especially when the community on Twitter, the Webflow community, often the people that are shouting the loudest are shouting because of their wins. Like, you don't necessarily hear about people's losses. So it's really cool that you have that document on Notion to revert back to. And I have the same thing, actually. I would really, really recommend having something on Notion, or some kind of home base, where if you're having a bad day, you can just look at how far you've come, because often we don't take stock nearly as much as we should, as how far we've come in such a short space of time. And I feel like you really can do that using Webflow. Like, where in a year, if you started from zero and just learned Webflow for a year, just the amount of growth you can have is insane.
Yeah, it also kind of like helps you to keep in line, and like if you haven't achieved something, like you're clearly missing out on some steps. Like, what are you not doing to not achieve that? And then at least being able to look at that and try to break it down further on how you can actually achieve that, whether it's that example of like doing 5 clonables a year, making sure that you then are saying to yourself, okay, you know what, every Friday I'm going to take 2 hours to dedicate it towards that, and then making sure that you've got those actionables in place to actually achieve those goals.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. It's nice to not just look at how far you've come, but also where you can improve, and whether those goals are actually helping you or not. Speaking of money, I'd like to get into failure number 2, because I feel like we've given some really, really helpful advice on comparing. Set up a Notion doc, write down a few goals, write down some crazy goals, write down some manageable goals, just like Jenna has, and review it when you're feeling low, or maybe when you feel like you want to improve. I think that's such good advice. But the second failure that we want to talk about today is money. Knowing the difference between being smart versus being stingy. I personally really want to know what you have to say about this, because I've been struggling with this as well. Talk to us, Jenna. Give us your wisdom.
Yeah, I'm pretty good with my money just in general. I think I have my parents to thank for that. But ever since going out on my own, and obviously like being in control and not being in control of the money that's coming in and out of what I'm doing, has made me maybe a little bit more stingy than I generally would have been in the past. But there have been a couple of like really basic things that I've been stingy and laugh at myself now for even have being like that. And I mean, a basic example is an office chair. Like, it took me till today, over like now it's about 2 years of not investing in a good office chair and just thinking I could get by with like a really crappy one. And ultimately, it's just I'm fooling myself, because here I am struggling with some back problems now, and that ultimately then leads to going to a physio and paying more money for something that I really could have just done in the beginning. So it can be the most basic things, and obviously like bigger purchases or investments in yourself and in your company. But it's really being able to distinguish between being smart and investing in yourself, or just being a bit silly, like thinking that you can save those little pennies on the side, and you're better off without it. But really understanding, if you don't spend that money, are you preventing yourself from potentially growing in your business, in your career, or are you potentially harming yourself in some way, like your health or whatever? But yeah, like figuring out those lines and trying not to let them get too blurred. I don't know if you've struggled too much with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've had a slightly different thought about this from the point of view of mentorship. People always talk about getting a mentor and stuff, and I paid a lot of money for a mentorship course, like a cohort-based course, which I have mixed feelings about in hindsight, frankly. I just don't think I was the right candidate for this cohort-based course. But there are a lot of people out there that can say, hey, take my course and we can get you to 5K consistent revenue every month type thing. And the problem with that type of a sales pitch is that the people that really, really want that are the people that really, really need the money at that stage. And they are the ones who, are paying thousands of pounds for these cohort-based courses to supercharge your business or whatever it is. Now, I paid for this course. It didn't help me in the way that the sales pitch, presented itself as. I'm not bitter, just to be clear. But what I'm saying is that I think just be aware that there are a lot of people online that have big promises, and frankly, if the promises are too big, then what you think might be an investment in yourself and your business and your personal development actually might be one huge cost and a setback that you're paying monthly installments, just like I was, for a few months, and it can be quite difficult. So yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think what people value, people pay for what they value. So it's kind of subjective, this idea of being stingy or being smart. But yeah, if there's anyone out there watching now who is thinking about paying a lot of money for mentorship, just be sure that the person you're paying the money to is someone that you actually want to be like, or don't just be taken in by a sales pitch. That's my
do your research. So I think it's like social media is flooded with all of these courses and mentors, and you want to hit the 10K club, and it's like, especially when I started, all these, like, I don't know, 10K boss babes, and it was all over the show, and I just thought, is this what it's all about? Like, am I meant to be hitting 10K? Like, is that my goal? And it really started to freak me out. But then I started to realize how many of those there were, and to me it just started to fall really flat. Like, I've actually never, and I'm grateful for this, but also I know it's worked for some, I've never felt the inclination to do any sort of mentorship. And maybe that's it. I suppose it is all journey dependent and person dependent. Maybe I've just felt like strong enough to kind of tackle things myself and not have to try and have a mentor to give me guidance or whatever. And of course, that can be helpful. But it is a rather like saturated sort of market. And who do you trust? But then that is something, again, that Twitter has been so great at, is like you get people asking, what Webflow courses should I do? And you get so many recommendations that it can be quite difficult to end up doing one that's not good, because if you go looking for advice, you will find it. And yeah, so that's, I suppose it's the same thing. Like, if you feel like you want to grow more, and you should always be growing and you should always be learning, is to not be afraid to invest in yourself and invest in doing courses that are going to help you grow and help you learn and gain new skills. But it's easy to look at it and see the price of it and be frightened off. But you need to kind of understand, what is that going to enable you to do in the future, and what are the potential clients that you're going to get out of gaining those skills.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just understanding exactly what the value you're getting from whatever that investment is. Like, is it an investment or is it a cost? I think this is the kind of crucial way to think about spending money when you're trying to choose what resources are going to help you develop your business. But if anyone has any, I'm sure there are people that have made some silly investments in their business in hindsight, and maybe some really smart ones. So if anyone who's watching has any of those, please do drop them in the comments for us all to have a look at as well. Are there any really smart investments, Jenna, that you've made in your business that, apart from the chair, that you might recommend anyone that's watching now?
If I'm really honest, there isn't a lot that I feel I've really like invested in. I've started with the most basic things. Like, I have a paid Notion, and one of the things that, again, I was being stingy with was signing up to Google Workspace. Like, I didn't want to pay $6 a month for a personal business email. So I was doing this like roundabout route of having a Gmail and forwarding a business email to this Gmail so I could avoid the $6 cost. And then ultimately, all of my emails were going into people's spam. So that didn't really work out too well. But really, I've had like the very basic fundamentals. I think one of the things that I've recently started looking into, which I'm happy I'm doing now, is working with an accountant. Up until this point, I've been doing everything myself, pretty manual, like doing my invoices in Figma and like making sure they're all pretty and tracking stuff in Notion. And I'm realizing that having accounting software is going to be incredible, like that I can actually track things and I can see how much I've earned over the year so far, how much tax I'm expected to pay, to just really manage all of that. So I think that's probably quite important. Like, if you are growing, your business is growing quite quickly, or you as a freelancer are growing quite quickly and you're getting more clients and they're paying more money, to really like stay on top of all of that is to definitely invest in either working with an accountant or becoming familiar with some sort of software. I've just started using Sage. I don't know if that's like I think it's an international accounting software. But that's the one that I've just started working with, and I kind of regret not doing it a little bit sooner, because now I'm like having to go back a year and put in my invoices and all of my expenses and stuff to catch me up until this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's anywhere that is like a really helpful early investment for a freelancer, it's because I don't think freelancers are generally that like mathematically orientated, should we say. I don't know if that's fair, but that's certainly my case. Freelancing, accountancy software was a godsend. Because trying to work out taxes and stuff and things is an absolute
What has been your top investment, Jack?
Awards courses. They are, in my opinion, the best courses to learn Webflow and to level up your Webflow game. Joseph Berry's awards course is epic. If you like Joseph Berry's websites, I mean, you can kind of just get behind the scenes as to his thought process and then how he actually implements that on a website. He's one.
I actually got the course and I haven't finished it yet. I think I bought it like 4 months ago and I've got halfway.
This is the problem with buying courses, though. You know, sometimes you buy the course and you're like, I'm going to do that. I'm really excited to do that. And you start and then you never finish it. But I would really recommend finishing that one. It's a really good course. Another place that I've invested money is Domestika courses. And their courses are, I don't know how they're so cheap, but they are really, really cheap. And they kind of do these flash sales where if you buy 3, you can get 3 for whatever, 20 quid or whatever. But you're learning from the most incredible designers and developers out there. So they have really good brand identity courses. There's all sorts of really, really good, cheap courses out there. It definitely means that you have to be disciplined to do them, though, as we've discussed. You know, it's not, they're not that expensive for the quality of the education that you get from them, but no one's hand holding you, no one's holding you accountable. You know, it's one of those things that you've kind of got to put in the work for those to actually be valuable investments, I guess. But yeah, I feel like those are the best kind of, if you're starting out with Webflow, awards courses, I think are epic. Webflow University, though, is, I mean, I think rinse the free stuff and then
dive into that kind of. I think what I struggled with those courses, though, is, or at least now, is that I follow FinSuite Client first, and the way Joseph does stuff is quite different in terms of like the units that he uses and like the way he builds things. So I suppose that's always like a bit of extra homework, is if you're watching the way that he's doing things and you're following a different way of building, is to try and marry them together. Which is, I think maybe it was why I kind of not lost interest, but I kind of fell off a little bit with that course, was because I saw the way he was doing it. And I did love that aspect of like seeing how his mind works, because he's bloody incredible. But it was maybe then like me switching off a bit in like terms of not taking that time to see how I could sort of use the way he was doing things with the way I was doing things. I don't know if
that makes a lot of sense. I think he is Timothy Ricks's wizardry method. And I think essentially what I really enjoyed about Joseph Berry's course was the animation style and learning about, you know, how he thinks about text moving in from different places and things. But yeah, I agree. You do need to get your head around, you know, what different metric, you know, he's using. But yeah, if anyone else has got any other bits and bobs to drop in the chat. Brandon says he loves the award courses. They're great. Timothy Ricks is Patreon for the development side of things. That's something that I've been looking into. I definitely want to get involved and support Timothy Ricks. I mean, I would definitely pay him, you know, some money for all the incredible education that he's given us all for free on YouTube. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good investment too. So the contracts, we're going to get on to failure number 3 now. Jenna, talk to us about contracts. It sounds like you've had a difficult time with contracts in relation to collaborating with other designers. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, of course, going into this, like I've never worked in an agency or anything, so I really was so unaware of contracts and like how things work with clients or with like collaborating with other designers. And I've kind of just figured out my way as I've gone along. And obviously I'm still adding to my contract today, because I don't know if that ever ends. Like you always have different experiences and different learnings that I think you can always kind of adapt your contract. For now, I think I've got a reasonably good one, although very simple. But yeah, there was one one sort of instance that's definitely stood out to me and has taught me a lot. And I had quite early on into starting with Webflow, I had partnered with a incredible designer, and she had actually found me originally when I was working on WordPress, and we worked really well together. We were pretty chilled, the way that we handled things, but in hindsight, and after going through what I've gone through now, was that in the beginning stages, there was never any contract between the two of us. And that seemed, I don't know, somewhat normal when I initially went into it. But I realize now that no matter what, no matter who you're working with, there should always be some sort of contract involved, and always very clear boundaries of what your role is, what the do's and don'ts are, to what capacity you're working with a client. This is specifically obviously working with collabing with someone else. And none of that was addressed. So there was a bit of a sticky situation where there was a referral from a previous project we both worked on together, and she had then asked me to come in for development work with this new project, and I'd quoted, and then I actually got a direct inquiry from this referral to do everything myself. And naturally, being the early stages of doing this, I was super keen, and I was like, I'm in, I want to do the whole thing, and a really exciting project and really exciting client. And so I went in excited and ready, and I just thought, I'm going to pop her a message just to let her know that it's happened. They've reached out to me, and I'm really keen to respond and do a proposal myself, but I've let them know that I want to chat to her first. And it turned out that she was under the impression that it's work that I shouldn't take on because it was a referral based off of a project that she had brought me into, which to me at the time, I didn't understand, because none of that had been addressed before. So it kind of just turned into a bit of an awkward situation. I'm still on great terms with her, and she's incredible, but it was a short sight on both of our ends that we hadn't actually discussed any of that in the beginning of working together.
Yeah, and it's almost made harder when you really get on with that person, you're very friendly with them, because you're kind of like, oh, well, nothing's going to go wrong because I trust you and you trust me, and that can be the worst for you don't necessarily have the foresight to think, oh, anything could go wrong, we're going to need a contract. So I mean, did you handle that as well as you feel like you could, or do you think in hindsight you would have I don't know, spoken to her and written something up together, or how would you have approached it differently now?
If I had to go back to when we first met, now knowing what I know, it would definitely be really understanding those boundaries of what capacity I'm being brought into the project on. Am I a white label developer, or am I now part of her agency or team, or am I still me, Jenna from Holy Moly? At what level? Because obviously it becomes tricky if I am Jenna from Holy Moly and I'm communicating with the client and you're communicating with the client, then naturally they have my contact details. So once that project's over and they've got a friend that reaches out to them and they go, oh, I know this developer Jenna from Holy Moly, and they reach out to me directly, of course that can happen. So it's really understanding then, okay, if I'm being brought in on this project, I'm not communicating as Jenna from Holy Moly. I'm communicating as Jenna from XYZ. But it's really understanding those boundaries and having those discussions beforehand. Otherwise, you are going to end up in a tricky situation and feel like you're getting the short end of the stick rather than getting what you feel you deserve potentially.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like quite a unique scenario to have been in, though, especially that early on in your Webflow journey. Do you feel now that, I mean, it sounds like you're very on it with contracts off the back of this. So I guess in hindsight, it was kind of the best thing that could have happened if it was going to happen at any point in your freelancing journey, I guess it's good that it happened then. I actually had a very similar scenario where, well, kind of similar scenario. I didn't have a contract in place with an agency, and they were like, "Yeah, we're going to pay you. We're going to pay you. We're going to pay you." And a month goes by, don't hear anything. Another month goes by, and I was like, okay, I need to pay my rent. And I actually was owed $8,000. So this is like a hefty sum. And then luckily, a friend of mine knew like a law group that dealt with freelancers like me, and I managed to get the money. But if anyone is watching and is like, "Oh yeah, contracts, like who cares?" Care about contracts, because they can be the difference between like an easy life and a difficult life. like months down the line as well. Like just having one in place from the get-go just means that life is so much easier.
I guess you always go into, or at least I like to think a lot of people go into these things like assuming that everyone has good integrity and is honest and is going to stick to their part of the agreement, whether it's verbal or contractual, but the reality is no matter how great a person seems, you don't know them, especially clients. Like, they're not your mate of 10 years. Like, you haven't been hanging out with them for ages. Like, you don't really know them. So although they might come across incredible over a call, it's not to say that they're not going to pay you for 2 months. And you have to really put your mind into a business mindset and document those things. Otherwise, you're just shooting yourself in the foot at the end of the day. And unfortunately, you kind of have to think the worst of someone before you can think the best of them, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And I would also second that if there's anyone watching that's freelancing, not just with clients, but with agencies, and agencies are like, oh yeah, just like start the job and we'll get it to you, we'll get the contract to you. No contract, no work. Like, even if they're an agency, even if they seem legit and stuff, because it can completely backfire. Because I've been like, yeah, I'll get the contract when I'll start and I'll get the contract and we'll get paid, and then it's
but it's hard. It's hard to stay true to that and stick to it, because you get excited about the project and you're like, hey, I want to get stuck into this as soon as possible. Like, because also you're thinking, I don't want to wait 2 weeks. Otherwise, maybe I'm going to get a backlog of work, and you want to hit the ground running and you want to go. So it's so hard to put the brakes on and be like, no, I've got to wait for that contract. And it really takes a lot of practice and like discipline to instill that in yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think at the other end of the scale, once you've finished a project and you're yet to transfer it to the client and you're waiting on the final payment with clients, having the resolution to be like, look, pay me and I will transfer you the project. Like, I'm not gonna change my process just because you say that you need the website quickly, type thing. Do you have kind of milestones? Is this, maybe this is kind of delving into your contract a little bit. Do you do milestones, Jenna, and do you advise that, or do you have a different system, and is that working better for you?
So I do a 50% before a project starts. Sometimes it's client dependent. If like I'm doing branding, web design, and web development, we might break it down into like doing branding first, doing a 50% at the start, 50% once it's complete, and moving on. But one thing I will say that I do is with all my projects, have transferred them before being paid my final amount, which I know could be problematic, but touch wood, it hasn't up until now. But I suppose in my mind, I'm like, okay, they've paid me the 50%. I kind of expect them to pay the 50% at the end. But now that I'm saying that out loud, like, obviously there might be a case when that doesn't happen. But clearly that's the way you handle it. So I do 50 50% deposit before, and then once the project's complete, then I'll do the 50% right at the end, once we do like the full handover and training call and whatever.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, the only reason why I say that is just because I've had a scenario again where I've transferred the project and then I've been like, okay, let's can you pay me please? And you're trying to be, you know, nice and respectful and stuff, when actually, you know, it's tough because you type an email and you're like, I can't send this, I'm going to go to bed, read it the next day, and it's like, whoa, okay. Like, I'm never going to get my money if I send this. So it's a difficult line. And what I found is, you know, if people have naturally spent a lot of money to get to this stage, you've finished the project, and they should be paying the final bill before transferring, is what I do. But it's interesting that you have a different system. Maybe we should talk about this off the podcast, because I feel like maybe people are just like, we don't really care how you do this, guys. But interesting all the same. Well, for me, I think in terms of lessons, then there's been so many things that you've said that have made me think, oh, I need to revisit my goals for this year and take stock of how far I've come. I think if anyone's listening hasn't got a Notion doc, some kind of home-based doc, that is the one big takeaway that I think is gold dust from this interview. Is there anything else, Gemma, that you think these guys, if you're just starting out and you want to learn from maybe some of the mistakes you've talked about during this podcast, is there anything that you're like, please just go away and do this?
I think one of the biggest things from my end was, you know, share your work. I honestly think that's number one, is whatever you create is to share it, whether it's on your Instagram, on your Twitter, on your Facebook, on your LinkedIn. Share it with the world for people to see, because if you're not doing that, people aren't going to find you. Like, you need to have a voice, you need to share what you're doing and what you're creating. And sometimes it takes longer for some people to be discovered and for things to take off, or sometimes you get really lucky. But ultimately, like we started this off, you know, everyone's journey is different, and don't forget that. But your time will come, as long as you are persistent and you're dedicated to what you are doing and what you love, and to just continue being passionate. And yeah,
I'd second that as well. Like, building in public, even if your project's not even finished, you know, I think show your work sounds something that your teacher would say before an exam, right? But actually, that kind of applies to real life now, certainly for me, that, you know, if something's kind of in motion, it's well worth sharing even that before showing the finished thing, because a lot of the time, you know, people are likely to help. I heard this really good like metaphor about this, where it's, if you're pushing a car up a hill and people see that you're pushing that car up the hill, then it's a hell of a lot more likely that people are going to come and help you push that car if they see you pushing it, right? Like, people want to support if you're trying hard, you know, to reach your goal or develop something or create a website for a client or whatever. They're way more likely to be like, oh, how can I help? Like, you know, can I get involved? Or maybe just say, keep going. And that really helps.
I love that. And I think it's very true, especially in the Webflow community. I don't think there are many communities that you can come across that are so willing to help and listen and give you the advice that you want. I mean, really, you can form such incredible connections, specifically on Twitter. And next thing, you're like sending a DM to someone that you've looked up to for a year or so, and they're kind of being a bit of a mentor to you, or are just giving you that push you need when you're maybe like too scared to send off that proposal with a huge, audacious like value assigned to it, you know. Yeah, I've
seen you actually post that you had I think you put a tweet out that you were saying, I'm about to send my biggest proposal ever. And the amount of support you got was amazing. And yeah, if anyone watching is like, oh, like, do I want to share this? Like, will people even care? Just do it. Just, show your work, or, share where you're at, and people are really likely to get involved and help. Felix has just said, I'm setting up my Google Workspace right now from Jenna's advice. So Jenna, you have already given value to Felix. He said, I was doing the little forwarding switcheroo and I think it ended up in their spam folder. So hey, lessons learned from failure. That is the whole goal of this.
$6 spent.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything that you want to add, Jenna, before we wrap up here?
No, I think we're good. I've loved this. You're an incredible host, Jack. This has really been enjoyable. Yeah, I've loved chatting about everything, and I look forward to watching all of your upcoming episodes.
Epic. Well, thank you very much. It was great interviewing you. For anyone that's still here, I will be putting up this on the website, which will be launched next week. I know I've been saying this for a little while, talking about building in public, but there'll be the transcript of this episode, and the actual website will be there with some articles, and I'm going to be doing some freebies as well, so stay tuned for that. But yes, speaking of Notion, that one might be there. But yes, thank you very much, Jenna. And thanks for everyone supporting live as well. Appreciate you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.